right, it's been a couple weeks since we've done a death lineup with Brian on a work trip in London. I saw he was out in Paris. I don't think he's hanging out with Jay-Z and Kanye, though. Ben Cruz is here to hang out with us for a little bit. We're going to talk trade deadline. And also, I'm going to ask this question, and I want you to hold your answer for a couple minutes.
Okay.
Did Andrew Wiggins okey doke the Warriors into keeping him? We'll see. We don't know yet because the trade deadline still has a couple hours until it is up. I guess the only real big deal that I saw that was of any sort of implication was the Bogdanovich to the Knicks.
Yeah.
That was very interesting. And man, I think they have a chance. That's awesome.
I mean, that lineup on paper seems really fun. I mean, it's a very much a 2K lineup right now that I want to go run because it's just very well rounded, And I say this with the Julius Randle injury,
Yes,
right? Because I think he's like the awkward fitting piece of that team. I don't know if I think everyone outside of New York is saying that, but I think everyone, Knicks fans alike are just they believe in this team and they should. But this team without Randle, I mean, that's a fun team. So. Great stuff by them today.
I guess I saw Gordon Hayward to Oklahoma City. That was, I'm not sure. I mean, I'd have to do some reading. I'd have to really look into OKC, but just on the top of your head, what does Hayward do for the Thunder here?
I mean, my biggest thing with him is he going to play?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and the injury stuff aside, I mean, let's just say he's healthy for the sake of this conversation. I don't really understand the fit there. I mean, I guess it's another playmaker to play next to Shea, or you stagger with Shea, but then you also have Giddey, who's obviously he's had an interesting year, but statistically he's been a little off, but he kind of plays the same way that Hayward does. So yeah. I don't quite understand the fit, but I mean, I guess you're going for veteran experience there. That one was a little funky to me. On paper, Gordon Hayward, great addition, but in reality, I think when we dig a little deeper with this, it's not going to be as impactful of an addition as probably they hope.
Yeah, I would have thought size, right? A little bit of height, because they kind of play. They're like the Warriors from like 2016, where there's nobody taller than like 6'8" or something in their best lineups. But yeah, the Gordon Hayward thing, it's like, okay, Josh Giddey, in 15 years, this is what you're gonna look like. It's two white dudes who can handle, who can create, and maybe it's like a thing for Giddey, for mentorship, or here's how here's what you need to do to become what we want you to be. Look at this guy. That could be interesting. But
I mean, to your point of comparing him to the 16 Warriors, it could just be a situation where they have a lineup where essentially all five dudes could create, right? Where you run Shea, you run Jalen Johnson, you run Hayward, you run Giddey, and then you run Chet at the 5.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's the thinking there. I think with it, I think it's a funky fit, but if it's them considering, we need to maybe lighten the load off of Shea's shoulders a little bit, I can understand it from that perspective. But again, is he going to play is probably the biggest thing for me.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about Andrew Wiggins. I gave you that question because now text messages and group chat messages aren't necessarily analysis. They're often very reactive and
irrational.
Andrew Wiggins has had some moments to where I am sure people in group chats are firing off texts and messages saying, we got to get rid of this guy. He's killing us. But since Draymond came back, Andrew Wiggins and Jonathan Kuminga together with Draymond have been really, really good. And I saw the defense come back for Wiggins last night, because there's been a lot of situations where he'll get screened and then he's trailing his guy. Like, he doesn't really get through the screen. He doesn't go under the screen, but he kind of like, there's like a delay and he's still trailing, and it ends up with somebody usually shooting a wide open 3-pointer. Last night, I thought he was fighting to get through everything, and he was contesting. He was making it really hard for Maxey to get where he wanted to go. And I was like, wow, where has this Wiggins been all year long? And I guess that's part of the problem is, he needed a little bit of a kick in the butt, it seems, or maybe there's other stuff because we know last year with the personal matters in his life that caused him to sit out. We don't know any of that stuff, so we can only basically judge on what's on the court.
Sure.
But man, he looked like a completely different player last year. That was one of his best games of the season, I thought.
Yeah, and I mean, it obviously helped that Embiid, wasn't playing. And they've now beat the Sixers essentially twice in the last week and change.
Yeah.
I know Embiid played in the last one, but that was the fire that lit this whole forcing Embiid to play conversation, right? So, I mean, you're right. Last night he looked really, really good. Obviously, was the best player on the floor for the Warriors, which is a wild thing to say. And again, you and I were talking about this before we hopped on. Draymond's return, just kind of sliding him back into where he is from a positional standpoint, from a basketball standpoint, is huge. And not to get too psychoanalytic here, but it might have also slotted him back in there mentally, right? Because without Draymond, whatever during his suspensions, plural, he probably had that thought of, what, I gotta step up. I gotta be X, Y. I gotta be that. I have to be that number 2 guy now to Steph because Klay's not playing as well as he has in the past. And I don't know if Wiggs is built for that, if that makes sense. And now that Draymond's back, Kuminga's rise, Steph playing at an elite level, like he's kind of being re-slotted back into that 4th guy, and I think that's where he thrives, right? Where the pressure's not on, but as a 4th option, any other team would kill to have an Andrew Wiggins type player as a 4th option, right? And look, for someone who gets paid as much as he does, and the trajectory that we thought his career was going to take after the 22 finals, I get that's disappointing probably to hear or to come to that realization. But if that's what Wiggins needs to kind of embrace that role and just kind of find himself again, you just got to do it. It's kind of like the piece that Marcus Thompson wrote yesterday about Klay Thompson, about, find mentally, sometimes you just have to find your role, and that's what helps. Play better on the court. So maybe it's I don't know. Maybe I'm being too psychoanalytic here, but it's really hard to fully explain why without Draymond, him and Kuminga were what, a minus 106, and then together with Draymond, they're a plus 74 according to Anthony Slater's article today. It's wild, man.
By the way, I am refreshing Shams's his Twitter constantly, just in case something happens.
Just in case Wiggins gets traded in the middle of this conversation.
I like what you said, though, because Draymond obviously is centerpiece of the defense. And you would think, based on what we saw in the finals, that if Wiggins had that responsibility, now it's going to be a different responsibility than Draymond's, but that he would go, okay, now with Draymond out, I'm the best defender. And in order for us to compete, I really have to ball out defensively to make up some of this stuff. And I also got a rebound. And that's what he did last night, too. But then there are so many moments where he just looks so sleepy out there, like just, going through the motions. And 82 game season, we get it. But this dude has been like, he's been the best player on his team since he was probably 10 years old, all the way through the Minnesota years. And so you think, hey, you've been this dude before. You could, if the team needs you to be kind of the best player, the second best player, you could do it. But that just hasn't been his role at the Warriors. So I like that point, and I just hope that the other thing that we could have all these high hopes, because they're 23 and 25, they're fighting to get back to 500. But the second somebody else gets hurt, it kind of just deflates your expectations, because we're always looking at this as, okay, what do you do when the roster is complete and healthy?
Right.
And yet it's almost never complete and healthy. And so that is also going to be a big part of this. All right. You talked about Klay. I felt like Marcus's piece on Klay was almost like can somebody make sure Klay reads this? You know, Clay's very
My fellow
anti
Thompson brother.
Clay's very anti social media and reading the comments, like, and I'm with him. I don't think I'd be able to do it as
Oh, no.
a NBA player or
I
celebrity.
can't do it now, Double
I know,
G.
yeah,
With podcast
exactly. I'm
stuff.
with you.
I
I'm
can't.
with you. You know how many people I block on Twitter who just come on to troll? I don't even give them a chance to have fun. I just immediately block.
Yeah.
So Klay has had a rough patch. He's had a rough season. This is statistically his worst season of his career. His shooting percentages are down. Like when I watch and I see him pull, I'm like, the shot looks exactly the same. Like there's nothing different. And maybe the defense is a little bit closer to him than they have been. And I want to say, I'm trying to think of, I can't remember exactly who the credit was to give, whether it was Bill, whether it was Russillo, or somebody else on Bill's podcast who came on. And they said the difference is that without the athleticism, teams close out on Klay without having to play the drive. So they just they just close out harder without any worry about getting beat because he doesn't have the athleticism to then beat them on the drive. I thought that was an interesting point because if you go back and there was somebody retweeted the Warriors beat the 76ers in 2017 and they were down by like 20 in the third quarter. And it was just clips of the Warriors scoring and coming back. And some of that was Klay open in the corner, up fake, drives, hits a midi. And that you don't see that right now from him. It's either if the three's there, he pumps it. Sometimes if it's not there, he pumps it. And if it doesn't, he pulls it back and he swings it. So that I actually like that theory about the athleticism and the closing out piece. But ultimately, like, what is Klay for the Warriors right now? He's still starting. He may not be closing. Guy Santos, our guy, closed over him a couple of games ago. And I think that was probably a little bit of a thing that hit Klay in the heart. But it is also realistic based on what Marcus wrote. Klay needs to find a role. He needs to evolve or devolve as a player because he's not that same guy he was even 5 years ago.
I've really tried to figure out the Klay thing too, and I appreciate you and Brian in our group chat just bearing with me as I tweet through it. Essentially, just my text figure just going nuts. I really kind of piggybacking off of the Wiggins thing, and this is a whole Warriors thing that I've really just been trying to figure out this whole season because it's just been weird. With Klay, I believe the Bill segment you're talking about. I think he was talking to Rob Mahoney, my guy.
Okay, that's who it was.
And it was a great point, and it's true, right? That you can see it every game, right? That the way that defenders are now closing on Klay, and even in some cases leaving him open, right? At Klay's peak, at the Warriors' peak, the spacing was so devastating because of his gravity as well, right? Everyone talks about Steph's gravity. Klay's gravity was just as devastating to defenses because it tilted them off balance, right? Of just like their coverages. And now, everyone has made a big deal about, Klay's acceptance of his role, right? And he's been one of the guys who's almost pushed of the three of Steph, Klay, and Draymond. I feel like he's pushed back the hardest, right? On any discussions about his talents diminishing, the team diminishing. And in a way, I feel like this is Father Time saying, guess what? I'm still here, right? Because you don't hear Steph talking about it ever. I feel like Draymond acknowledges it here and there. You kind of see the grays in the beard a little bit.
Yeah, but talking about all the young guys need to save us every once in a while.
And so that's an acknowledgement, right? Of like, hey, we're on the other side of this. Klay has been the one who's just been, again, pushing back. Like, I'm still here, counting the rings, pointing to his hands and all this stuff. And I feel like it has just been a huge mental hurdle for him to, one, not be as good as he was, before he tore his ACL and then subsequently his Achilles, right? I think that's a hard. He said it to Slater in that what's now like a viral interview, which it kind of, to me, it seemed like a no duh thing, but his acceptance of this, I think, has been a lot slower, and therefore I think hindered him more than the other two guys. And again, this is where I resorted to with this season, Double G, is just psychoanalyzing each individual player, because look, he's shooting 37% from three, right? Any player, if any other player is shooting 37% from three, we're talking about them as a key deadline piece right now, right? Where you're like, what contender is this player going to end up on? Now, a lot of these guys who are hoping for that aren't making what Klay's, I think, at $43 million this year. Marcus's piece, you're right. It seemed like if he embraces this, if he fully embraces, hey, there might be nights where I don't close, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Right. Because of the structure of the team, there's a lot of overlap there, right? Obviously Guy Santos was, I think, an extreme, as much as we love Guy, right? But are we having this discussion if, let's say, it was Moody who closed over him, who people have been clamoring to play in general?
Yeah.
Right? Are we having this discussion if CP3 was healthy and he's playing over Klay? I mean, maybe CP or GP2, because he's locked in as a defender. So if Klay can kind of find that almost that healthy mental space, just say, hey, look, I don't need to score 20 points a game anymore. I don't need to be a defensive stopper anymore. I just need to do my job okay, and we will be okay. Mm-hmm. But it's the classic case of him just pressing. You can see it, right? Last year, I remember everyone hyper focused on that Suns game where he was clearly chucking it, right? He was trying to shoot himself into rhythm. And I feel like this entire year has been that. And there have been games where he's found it, right? Where he's led the team in scoring. He's dropped 30. But for the majority of it, for the most part, again, this is why he's shooting career lows, percentage-wise overall, right? 41% from the field, 42, I guess, if you want to round up. It's a sign of a guy he's just pressing.
Yeah.
And you're right. The shot is still there. The shot still looks as good as it's ever looked. When you're at, like I was at Universal Studios 2 weeks ago, and my jumper's been the same. my jumper form has been the same since I was a kid, and I've always been an okay shooter. But look, I was trying to win our daughter a giant Simpsons stuffed animal, and you have to make it in one of these buckets. When you're thinking about it, when you say I have to make this or the world is over, mentally that takes a toll on you. And look, I'm nowhere near the shooter or the basketball player that Klay Thompson is, but we got to start diving into the human aspect of this, right? He's 33. He's coming off 2 major leg injuries. Why can't we look at it that way? I don't know. We lean on the stats a lot, and we're just,
the reason why you are trying to look at it from a human perspective is because we've just watched these guys forever.
Mm-hmm.
And the coverage locally is fantastic, to the point where you almost feel like you kind of know these guys a little bit.
That's
just
right,
because the coverage is awesome, right? Marcus, you can and Kawakami actually, he did an interview with Richard Deitch the other day, and I thought it was fascinating because it was really just about being a reporter in journalism.
Sure.
And he was saying how the reason why the Athletic Bay Area coverage is so good is because the reporters have relationships with these guys and they're trustworthy. And he was saying how Marcus has a relationship with Steph. He's like, think about how valuable that is to Marcus, but also think about how valuable that is to the Athletic is Marcus's relationship with Steph. And so when you talk about Klay, we treat him almost like a member of our family because we've been watching him since 2011, right? And we've been just watching his entire career. We sort of we feel the ups and downs. The thing about his position is interesting to me because back in the day when he used to guard the lead guard on the other team, he just plays defense hard. Shot goes up, and he doesn't have to worry about getting the rebound necessarily. He just has to worry about where the shooters are, if they get the rebound. Sometimes I see that on defense now with him, where he's like, he's obviously closer to the bucket now because he's guarding bigger players. And so shot will go up and he's like, did my job. I'm like, brother, the ball is bouncing right to you for a rebound. You got to turn around and get it. So sometimes he doesn't have that aggressiveness when it comes to the rebounding and when it comes to, the boxing out piece. And maybe that is also a part of it. Maybe it is a little bit like, okay, I need to get a little bit bigger. I need to get a little bit stronger. This is kind of where I go. I asked you yesterday, what are the comps to someone like Klay? Because I imagine what's killing him the most is he's like, oh yeah, me and KD had the same injury. How come he's still balling out like he's never missed a step and I'm not? That's probably got to be killing him. But you mentioned Sean Livingston, who was a crazy athletic player in his youth and who had to change his game, became old man game Sean, old man game S. Dot. And you also mentioned Grant Hill, who had all those ankle injuries and who also lost his athleticism. And he turns into like a corner 3-point shooter, mid-range guy, still could handle and still could pass.
He had was nice. Yeah.
Yeah, but he always had the ability to pass, always had the ability to handle. So those guys are guys who had the ball in their hands. So there's a little bit of a different style, and Klay is more, the shooting part is so much of how he feels that his value is. So yeah, I mean, those aren't exact comparisons, but I thought that they were pretty apt because you're talking about guys who were at the top of their, I don't think Livingston ever got to where people would have thought he may have because the injury was so early in his career. But Grant was one of the best players in the league before he got hurt, got hurt a bunch of times. So for Klay, I do wonder what Sean would have to say to Klay about how he reconfigured his game to match what his body was as he got older.
I mean, Dot mastered that kind of mid-range, right? When he was coming off the bench for the Warriors during their championship runs, every time I saw Sean play, I thought the midi was dropping every single time.
Yeah, he's like their best post player too.
He was just he was such an interesting fit for them, but he fit perfectly. And Klay, I feel like he's almost averse to shooting the mid range a little bit, right? It's. I feel like he plays like a 2K my player, like in the neighborhood. It's like it's threes or to the cup. Like he's still trying to do that, because he used to be able to do that, right? And you referenced KD earlier, and if there's a wonderment on Klay's part of like why, like what's the chasm here? It's because KD's mid-range game is elite, right? It's one of the best in the history of the league.
He's also 7 feet tall,
right? And he's he's an all-time. He's arguably a top 10, top 15 player.
Close out with a small guard on KD. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, and you will get demolished. Yeah. So, and I mean, I think also the difference there is, again, the two devastating back-to-back injuries, right? The ACL is one thing. People have come back from torn ACLs, right? But then to tear your Achilles right after, like right when you're on the precipice of being back. Do you remember that day, that draft day? Was it 2021, 2020? Whenever they drafted Wiseman, which trying to or 20, So it's I think that's a big part of it too, man. Is just that recovery process, I think, took a toll on him. And I think when his return, in 2021, 2022, it almost might have clouded the real, the reality that was coming, because he comes back. Remember that first game against the Cavs? Has a dunk right away, and you're like, oh, he's fine. And then they win the championship, right? So it's, in his mind, it's like he never missed a step. In reality, he missed 2 full seasons of his prime.
Yep.
Right, which is an insane thing to think about. So again, he's missed 2 full seasons. So maybe it's some Klay math, right? We always talk about boy math, girl math, all this stuff. But maybe this is Klay math, where he's like, I've only played this amount of games. I should still be this elite of a player.
Yeah.
It's. The Marcus article really was something that kind of, even for me, honestly, put it into perspective of, he's not horrible, right? There are games where he's clearly pressing, and he's cost the Warriors a couple of games, close games too. But there's also been games where they're not in it without him. It's this weird back and forth with him, I feel like, this year. And if he just kind of floats in the middle ground, which I think that's the most hesitant he's been to do, has been just, hey, I am now a 15 to 17 point per game scorer. Am I okay with that? I don't know. Last night, what he had 14, I think, 15. So maybe it's the start of it, but it's going to take more than just one game sample size.
Yeah, I don't usually record podcasts on game day because basically by the time we put it out, the next game is already over. But the reason why we're doing this today and early, I'm putting this thing out early before the Pacers game. One is because of trade deadline, but also just because of our schedules. This was the best time that it fit. So, I was gonna say, yeah, Klay's game against Philly was really solid. Like I would say a solid basketball game. And we'll see if he can keep that going, though. Indiana's young and fast, and and they run, and
they're going to run.
Probably not the best team for Klay to kind of get into a groove on, but
they also don't play a lot of defense.
Yeah, so that's true. That's true.
This might be some open
shots for him.
Yeah. By the way, he had 18 last night. By the way, I don't want to shortchange our guy. I don't want.
Yeah, I think he was like 4 or 5 from 3 or something.
4 or 5 from 3. Yeah, 50% from the field. That's a good Klay game.
And he even had a closeout. And then he drove to the basket, and for some reason, there was no 76er within sight. Like I don't know what they were doing.
They are without Embiid. That team is. They gotta hope he's healthy.
Latest trade, by the way, from Shams. Charlotte is trading PJ Washington to Dallas for Grant Williams.
Oh,
poor Seth Curry, and a pick.
Oh no, really?
Yeah.
Oof. I gotta believe those guys are gonna be
redistributed
or sent somewhere else. There's no way those two guys are actual valuable rotation pieces for an actual good team.
Yeah, it would be interesting it would suck for them to be in Dallas and you're fighting for a playoff spot, and then you get sent to the team that has like 10 wins all season long. All right, so a couple other things before we get out of here, because we both have a shorter stay because it is our work day. I put on my calendar lunch at 9:45, so I'm sure people are like, "Huh?" JK, we got to talk about JK. This has been the JK I think everybody has been waiting for. He is unleashed. He is making smart decisions. They are trusting in him. He's playing big minutes. I mean, he's the guy that they go to when they just need a 2-pointer. Like, it's almost like, gosh, we're slumping here. JK, go get us something at the rim. And he either gets fouled or he gets a bucket, or there's still some cases where he's kind of up in the air with no place to go. And, I know people in his position, they would say, well, he needs to keep working on that shot. You know what I think is even more important than working on that 3-pointer? Ball handling, because he's handling the ball a lot.
Yeah,
got to get a little bit tighter, and to have more than like he's got a nice little post move where he kind of fakes and he turns around and he shoots a little turnaround jumper, right, but almost around the free throw line, maybe a little bit closer than that. If he had one more move to where he could get, not that he has to go to the Akeem Olajuwon school of Dream Shake or anything.
How much is that? $50,000.
But I really do think if he worked, on another post move, it would free up a lot of stuff. Because at some point, he's a young dude, but all the dunking and the running up and down and crashing and stuff is going to catch up. Like I would like to see him, have one extra like go-to move and then improve that handle, because he does handle the ball a lot and he's getting by guys. What's going to happen is teams are going to smarten up and they're going to put their best wing guy on him to frustrate him out before he gets to the cup. And that's where he may have to pick up his dribble and then pass it back out.
Well, I mean, to counter that, wouldn't that be beneficial for the Warriors, though? Because right now, the opposing team's best wing defender is usually on Steph.
Yes.
Right. So if they want to pull that move and put that defender on Kuminga, I mean, again, that just flips the script for Steph, and then he's being guarded by the second best defender, and that opens him up.
Yeah, I'm more thinking in like open court scenarios where
sure.
You kind of switch it a little bit, but then you trust JK think he's actually made some really great passes. And some passes have been a little off, but the idea has been there. So that's actually the thing I'm second to him just getting to the rim at will. That's my second favorite thing about him is his ability to see things before they happen, because usually in the past he was like a half second too late and then it wasn't there anymore. But now like he's gotten Klay and Steph butt naked, wide open threes just because he's actually attracting a little bit of the defense now. So I think that opens up even more. And to your point, if they have to use a guy to stop him from going downhill, then it just opens up stuff for everybody else. So yeah,
I mean, it's that classic cliche of the game is slowed down, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can actually see that with him because the past 2 years he seemed to be in a rush, and now he's so much more patient. It's just wild to kind of see this evolution like in the middle of the season, right? And especially after that report from a couple months ago, he lost all faith in Kerr, and that the season just seemed to be kind of going even more down.
The one faux pas for JK this year was that.
Yeah. And I think he him and his team locked that up, and that's totally fine. But it's been interesting to see the Kerr almost have to deviate from the democracy of an offense where it's everyone's got to touch the ball to just, hey, if we need a bucket and in the half court, we're just gonna have Steph set a screen for him, right?
Yeah,
and just try to get JK downhill and just see what happens and let him make decisions. That's why, because you're right. He's become a better passer. Like I think that's been one of the biggest improvements in his game overall. But again, that doesn't come without the playing time, which I know has been a big talking point about him in general, but also just the trust from Kerr. Like that's wild. Again, this also just, I try not to put Steph over too hard just to not come off like a homer. But what other player, great player, all-time great player, is just looking at some third-year guy and saying, you know what, let me set some screens for him real quick after I just went off, or I took 38 shots the night before or whatever it was. You know what I mean? So
Steph's playing the long game, right? Because he knows that as he gets older, he's going to need a second guy. And maybe that is JK, or maybe JK is the third guy and they bring in a second guy. But he knows that the better that Kuminga is, it's going to help him because Kuminga is drawing attention. And he may have to set a screen, but then the screen action actually screws up the defense. And then Steph sometimes is like more open than he is usually in that moment. So yeah, no, I'm with it. And I'm so glad that they hung on to JK, and JK almost helps these younger guys because you see Lester and Gee closing out these games. It's like, wait, is this the Bizarro Steve Kerr? What happened here? But, with the injuries, he was kind of forced into leaning on the momentum and the athleticism, and Gee Santos diving on the court for loose balls. And he's like, okay, well, let's allow this to keep happening because otherwise, we're stuck with, and some of it is Dario got sick, but man, Dario just
rough stretch for Dario.
He's had it. If he's not making threes, it's almost like he's unplayable. So we'll see what happens there. But you and I both have meetings to go to. But I wanted to ask you one thing before we get out of here. It's unrelated to the Warriors. What is your Super Bowl prediction here?
Oh God. In all honesty, I've avoided all Super Bowl prediction content because I'm sick nervous.
Me too.
About it. Oh my gosh. And this is, again, I haven't even looked at the line, the betting line, since the conference championship game.
I think it's pretty much the same. It's very close to what it was.
Like -2 Niners.
Yeah, 2.5.
So,
it might have even gone up to 2.5.
Up, really? That's interesting. I'm gonna go Niners. The straight homer pick. I'm gonna say it's a close game, and if everything is true that they had that defensive meeting with Steve Wilkes and the entire defense, that they just agreed what happened against the Lions was embarrassing.
Yeah,
and they've tightened up everything they need to tighten up. and they say, look, we got to get pressure on Mahomes or it's over.
Yep.
Against our secondary, the Niners secondary is only okay. I think that they can do it. And I think they can run against. I think they can run against the Chiefs.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a weapons thing with them. I think Shanahan is going to be really creative because he's got to take a little bit of pressure off of Brock. I think Brock, most people hope and cross their fingers that he can handle the pressure, and he's shown that he's a tough dude. This is just a different stage and a different level altogether. But by creating opportunities for Debo and CMC to kind of get out loose and shake free a little bit, I think that takes some pressure off him. I saw Demo Lenore was like, yeah, last time we played the Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes went crazy on us. Not happening this time. I'm like, dude, it doesn't even matter. You don't matter in this. It's going to be whether or not they can get pass rush. That's the whole thing.
That's literally their entire defense is because if they get pass rush, that secondary all of a sudden becomes elevated. Right?
Yeah.
If you're comparing it to the Warriors, it's when the Warriors defense was elite, Steph was fine. Right?
Yeah.
Steph was fine. The pseudo point of attack defender. When your defense starts to slip a little bit,
Steph has never seen himself on an island so much in his life these days.
Especially since he's getting older, like people are just attacking.
Him.
And you should, right?
Yeah,
you want to exhaust him on the other end. So
absolutely,
it makes a whole lot of sense.
All right, Ben, thank you for doing this. Shorter pod than usual, but we had to fit it in where we could get it in. And as far as the trades so far. Nothing going on. I guess David Roddy to the Suns for a pick swap as part of a three-way deal with Phoenix and Brooklyn. So that's another thing there. All right. Thanks to Ben. Check out Wednesday Worldwide for you pro wrestling fans on the Ringer, and also Austin Rivers podcast I know is blowing up, and Ben is a big part of that on the producing end. So check it out, ringer.com. For Ben, I am Double G. We will see you when we see you. Peace out.
Peace.